Hi, everybody. It's Callie Williams Yost, and I am here today with one of my very favorite people, Susan McPherson, the author of this great new book, The Lost Art of Connecting: Gather, Ask, Do Method for Building Meaningful Business Relationships. A book I feel very strongly we all need right now, particularly at this moment in time, which I will talk about more with Susan in a minute. But let me first tell you a little bit about my friend Susan. We've known each other forever. I feel like we met on her CSR chat on Twitter a very long time ago that she used to host. But Susan she really is a serial connector, angel investor, and corporate responsibility expert. She has more than 25 years of experience in marketing, public relations, and sustainability communications. She is the founder and CEO of McPherson Strategies, a communications consultancy focused on the intersection of brands and social impact. They provide storytelling, partnership creation, and visibility to corporations, NGOs, and social enterprises. She really is the go-to person when it comes to CSR, ESG, so many things that have become even more important recently. And something else, the author of this amazing book that is now very, very important too, The Lost Art of Connecting, the Gather, Ask, Do method, which is important that I'm emphasizing that, for building meaningful relationships. And that is what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to tell you, hello, Susan.
Hello, Callie. It's wonderful to be here.
It is so, so great to see you. And I'm going to spend a few minutes providing some context to everybody as to why I think this is very, very important and why I'm excited to talk to you today. So first, as I've said, I think we've known each other for more than a decade. I wish I could remember how it all started, but it doesn't matter. The point is, it started, and it's been a wonderful, I've had wonderful opportunities over the years to actually watch the way you connect the dots, the most amazing dot connecting that you do between all sorts of different people for all sorts of different reasons. And I really legitimately, over the years, as I sat in awe and wonder, would say, I really wish I'd love to know how she does this. Like, what's her secret? Because it seems so effortless, but I know it takes intention. And yet I couldn't really figure out what it was. And I always thought, someday I'm going to ask her. Well, here we go. She has put it into this book. And honestly, the dog-eared, you should see, dog-eared, highlighted. I mean, really just thought this book is really, really fantastic. Now, this is what made me sort of smile. So people often say, so how do I know it works? Where's the evidence? All right, I want to tell you where the evidence is. Go to the front of the book. She has the most unbelievable number of blurbs at the front of this book. It is literally 6 pages, teeny tiny pages of amazing experts across business, thought leaders, entertainment, authors. I mean, really and truly. And I'm going to tell you why that is the case. Because as somebody who's written 2 books, Susan, you know this, it is not easy to get a blurb. People are busy. Okay. And you just have like a million of them because she's the ultimate connector. These are people that she has intentionally brought into her orbit over the years, done things for them, gotten to know them. And then when she needed something, which is a blurb for the book, they were willing to step up, and she's got this crazy amount of blurbs. So if you want to know if Susan knows what she's talking about, look at those pages because you will see. Okay. So now I want to talk about the other reason I'm really excited about this. And I think every organization and leader really needs to think about introducing this book to their organizations and their people for one reason. We have undergone a radical disruption in the way we work, therefore interact with one another just naturally, right? And there's a great article in HBR that just was published last week or 2 weeks ago entitled "The Year of Work at Home and What It Has Done to Our Relationships at Work." And I'm going to read the summary from the HBR article, and you'll understand from this summary why what Susan is talking about really has become something that we need to focus on in a very intentional way. So more than a year into COVID-19 pandemic and work from home, new research from Microsoft shows that employees and teams are becoming much more siloed. In particular, connections with people outside of our immediate teams has shrunk dramatically, leading to fewer places to connect around innovative ideas and fewer opportunities to build social capital. Further, this trend is making employees feel lonely and isolated. And to help address this issue, leaders should focus on being proactive about connecting employees across the organization, make space for connections outside of official meetings, and encourage and reward social support, and to improve the structure of meetings. So it's all about connection and how we have to make that happen. So, Susan, what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about how leaders can do this, encourage these connections outside of teams, individual teams, outside of these official meetings. And I think that your book, when I read it, it struck me this was a roadmap that organizations can follow. So with that, let's talk about making connections and how you do it. So here's my basic question that I think most people get stuck on when it comes to connecting. What is the difference between connecting and networking?
Well, first of all, Callie, thank you for the extraordinary introduction. Thank you for reading my book. Thank you for enjoying my book.
Loved it. I just loved it.
Value in it. And I think thank you also for seeing connecting as something that is not just a soft skill, because it is, as you just provided in the HBR article, it is vitally important to the future of companies, corporations, entities, organizations, nonprofits, you name it, because employees who are meaningfully connected actually stay at the company longer, their productivity increases, they are much more likely to recommend their company to other potential employees, and you know all the data. So your question, what can leadership do? I'm happy to get into, but first and foremost, what I see as the difference between networking and building meaningful relationships. I want to say for the record, I am not anti-networking. We all need to, okay? We all need to go, and we will be at some point going back into those rooms where there are, 50 people and us. With the feeling of, oh my God, I have to meet people. That is networking. Networking is very transactional. Networking is where you walk around and you shake hands or fist bumps, whatever we're going to be doing, and exchange business cards. You bring the business cards home and they sit on your counter, and maybe someday you actually write the people. Maybe you connect on LinkedIn, but there is not an ongoing, evolving, reciprocal, deep, meaningful anything that comes from that, like impact. So the basic, I think the difference I see just from a granular perspective is I'm suggesting going deep at a much smaller number of people. Okay, not going wide with multiple people. I also, when you go deep with one or two people, then you have the power and the data from which to connect them to other people. So you build what I call constellations of connections that then overlap, and you actually create stories. You create you create funding for startups. You create new job possibilities. You create funding for a nonprofit, and on and on and on. That is not what I have seen in quote unquote the transactional world of networking.
And I love that you have specifically defined connecting as something so much beyond that, because that really is where the power is. And I think people when they think of connecting, they misinterpret it as networking, which it is not. Yes.
And I think if it's spelled out in that way, or it's demonstrated to us in that way, all of a sudden we're like, oh, wow, that is kind of magical.
Yeah, it really is. It is. And let's think about how we can help people unlock the magic, especially in this new world. You talk about in the book, which is, again, I know you didn't plan on writing this book in a pandemic. I know you didn't plan on promoting this book in a pandemic. And you really honestly talked about the challenges that you faced having to rethink what you were offering in that context. But again, I think that really ironically ends up being very powerful for this moment, right? So for organizations that are still waiting, let's say, to focus in on how to reestablish some of these connections until we're back in the office, what would you tell them in terms of following your method, your gather, ask, do method right now while we're still working virtually? You said something on one page, on page 68, you have matched the medium with the contact. What can we do now while we're still not physically together to get this process going?
Well, there's many, many things each and every one of us can do, but I think what you are specifically asking is, from a company leadership standpoint. And first and foremost, I think companies who are not identifying this as a true opportunity are missing the boat. And to me, this is the time to start, as opposed to waiting until we are back into some sense of quote unquote normalcy, whatever that means. And we also, many studies are showing that the vast majority of people are not going to be back full time. Like, we are going to be in some sort of hybrid situation. So you may have some people who are at the office all the time and other people that are continuing to work from their respective homes. So right now is the time for leaders to start thinking about how are they going to start bridging the gaps and basically making it a priority, like building it in job functions, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Part of what gets measured, what happens? It doesn't get done.
Yep.
Right? So, I don't think we can expect just John Q employee to start running away with this if, one, they're not going to be valued for it or measured on it or blessed for it. So to me, this is the time. And yes, we don't have those quote unquote water cooler moments, but let's create them. And they don't have to be happy hours, right?
Yep.
They be literally opening up meetings with icebreakers that allow people to actually be a little more personal. But people aren't going to feel safe to be personal if the leadership isn't personal.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole bring your whole self to work and be authentic. Yes, those are all wonderful things to say, but a lot of people don't feel safe doing that, and for good reason. So they can't do that if you, as the leader, owner, C-suite person, doesn't do it yourself.
So, you want to hear a story I just heard the other day and you can use this because I think it's brilliant, but it's so simple to what you were saying. So I'm working with an organization, a very senior leader was explaining to me how he's experimenting with finding ways to create these moments of informal interaction and connection with technology. So what he's done, which again is so simple, but it's so brilliant. He's twice a week, he opens up a Zoom room and just is there. And he sends a message out to people and says, I'm open.
Or overall?
In his group, whatever his department and he has got a lot of people. And I said, do you send it to everybody? He's like, yeah, everybody can come. And they just show up and he asks them questions. He tries to get to know them. And you'll love this. He said, what's really amazing, I didn't realize how many people I did not have access to before because they were too intimidated to come into my office. They weren't going to walk in and be like, hey there, Greg, they're not going to do that. So he does that twice a week. And now he's starting to think about what he's going to do on the other side of the pandemic to keep that virtual space, but then have once a week an office hours in his physical office too, right? Yeah. But I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely. And I love this example because, I am perpetually an optimist, probably to my fault. But what, I've been talking about there are some silver linings, right? I mean, thank God, right? I mean, I don't think I would have survived 13 months of being alone, completely alone, that I have been without some little pick-me-ups like what you just described. I mean, the beauty that we can be all together from a, geography aside is a tremendous gift. And that's something that, previously wasn't the case unless the company had exorbitant amounts of finances from which to throw at travel. This now can be something that can be continued. So I love to hear what Greg's doing. Tell him he's spot on, and I'm going to be sharing that example.
I've already shared it with a bunch of people, and it's funny because you think it's not that hard, but clearly something people haven't thought about. But I love that example for two reasons, not just him, for
Yeah.
creating the space, but the people who take him up on it,
Yeah. Well,
right?
and I would imagine it reverberates because it probably at first wasn't, and then it just kind of grew. It's a little like my JOMO instead of FOMO, which, it's like, I mean, obviously at a very different level because he's a very senior executive. But when I was first a trained sales executive, I was operating in a territory where I had zero penetration and no one knew the company I was working for. And I wasn't getting invited to any of the quote unquote industry events. So I started my own. And so what I did was I flipped fear of missing out instead of the joy of missing out to the joy of meeting others. And
Yep.
started
Yep.
inviting 3 to 4 people. And then by nature, each one brought, and then we slowly, within a few months, we were up to 160 people.
See, that's so great. And I think you can replicate that
Yeah.
in this virtual world right now, right? You can just say to get 5 of your colleagues on a Zoom chat, right? And say, bring a colleague that we don't each know. And then and what I love about your book, and we could spend an hour and a half talking about this, but you write out in the book, and why people should get it is, then how do you break the ice, right? What can you talk about? Because you want to use that time intentionally. And so I know this is the worst question when you're promoting a book. Can you give us 3 examples of what people would do? Because it's so much more meatier than that. But if you had to break your system down, your gather, ask, do system down, what's one thing somebody could do in the gather category? What's one thing somebody could do in the ask category? And one thing people could do in the do category that would illustrate the power of this method?
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously there's plenty in each category, but I think the most
Totally.
within the gather, well, it's hard for me to break it into.
I know, it's painful. This is the worst question. I know.
Because it's so interlocked. I would say the self-reflection component of gather is so vitally important. And I would say, because my entire thesis is built on how can I be of help, the one component of gather would be, what is your superpower that you bring to the table?
That's the one I wanted you to say. Ah, I love that one. I
get like a gold star. Like I feel like
yes,
big bell is going off.
Exactly.
Like,
I knew it. I want that one. Yes.
I feel like this is one of that NPR. Wait, don't tell me. And
I,
like 3 choices, and I just picked the right one.
You did the right one. Yeah, but I love that. Say more about that.
Well, I'm oftentimes people are like, well, what do I have to offer? What do I have to offer? And I make the contention, and I fervently believe this, that we all have chief differentiating factors. And at different times in our lives, we have different ones. But no matter how old or where we are, we do have secret sauces. So whether you're 22 and just graduating college, or you're approaching retirement, there are things that you can offer people, and there's people you can connect people to, et cetera. So I would say that's the one out of obviously multiple. The part about ask that I think is really, really important is the notion of being a good listener. Because no matter how many questions we ask of others, if we hear them and we see them, if we're not listening, we can't get to the third phase, which to me is the place I love to be most, and that is do. So if you ask people really meaningful questions, which is what happens during ask, and then when they start telling you or feeding you back data and you're thinking about what you're going to have for lunch, obviously you are going to miss all the key data points that you then can go to the next level, which is the do. And the do, I would say the most important, I mean, obviously doing, but I think is, is the art of the follow-up, and not requiring yourself to doing it right away, but I believe in responding right away, meaning yes, you don't have to do, like if you told someone you were going to introduce them to somebody, or you were going to help find them funding for a startup they were launching, or introduce them to somebody because there was a job they were looking for, all of those things are all well and good. But if you don't kind of respond in a meaningful time and reflect back to the person what you listened, not just heard, you won't ever even get to the do. So I think
Mhm.
is being responsive at a time that it doesn't kind of fall from the cracks. Because this year, especially, we've had so many, rightfully so, distractions, challenges, hardships. So to me, it's like at least get back to the person right away and and that helps you buy some time to actually do the do. So
You
those
know,
are three little things of each part.
all three are great nuggets, but I'm just going to reinforce that's literally just one in each category. Those are just one little piece of many, many other things that are in each one. But when you talk about in, okay, I'm not going to say this right. I hope I say this the right way. You value the random connections. And I think some of those random connections, sometimes informal random connections, we don't pay attention to. And
Right.
I love all the stories in the book around how you can, by paying attention to all the people in your life,
Yeah.
right? Not just the people sitting right in front of you. And maybe that's, I think, what's happening with teams is that you're just sitting and thinking right now about the people who are just right in front of your line of sight, being intentional about all the other connections in your life. And talk a little bit about some of the stories. And you said things like you find out about the person and you learn that they have a friend that lives in a town where you have a friend and you connect them with each other. Or I don't know, talk a little bit more about those connections as well.
One thing, and I'm so grateful of this now at the grand old age of 56, that my parents really instilled in me this sense of curiosity that has plagued me in some ways, but this notion that everyone has a story and back that everyone has something to offer, and to not make judgments or preconceived judgments based on data that came from maybe other experiences in our lives, to assume things, right? When we make assumptions based on somebody's position or what country they're from or what color they're from, I mean, excuse me, what color they are, what we do is we rob ourselves not only of learning something about them, but learning things about us as well. And to me, I have always, and again, back to that kind of joy of meeting others, I have always just been fascinated, but learning about people, but like really about people, not just the surface kind of like niceties. And yes, I guess that could be annoying to people who are extraordinarily private. And I apologize for anyone I offended over the years that I do ask a lot of
I,
questions. Um,
I'm sure everybody loves it, but
but the thing is when you go, I mean, obviously not being like, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Not being rude or harmful or being respectful. In other words,
Mhm.
I would never go but go ask of questions that should never be asked. And I am always very intentional about stating that these are things so I can be helpful to you.
Yep. Yep.
I get, again, someone may think there's some manipulation there, but it actually, as you have known, now that you've known me for more than 20
Yes.
years, that it is actually then so that I can make shit happen. So
Yeah.
we can rewind. Um, but I think this is this sense of surprise that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't think people, who are so very rote or, just go to work every day and do their jobs, that's fine, well and good. But what you're missing out is what else you can learn that you can then bring back to your professional lives. Or if you serve on nonprofit boards or you serve on for-profit boards, all of this data can be used that you can then bring. And from the work that you do, it's like we have to constantly be learning and
Oh, yeah.
exposing to things that we don't necessarily know. I mean, years and years ago, I worked for a company, PR Newswire, for 17 years. And every few years, I would have a different role, which is why I was able to stay there so many years. But inevitably, I was kind of the person who was always known to like run projects that had a time frame, maybe like 2 to 3 years.
Mhm.
So I would have to work across borders, across time zones, across different departments, but no one really worked for me. Um,
Mm.
so I had to learn to be able to work across all kinds of differing subsets, and get people to do things when they didn't report to me. And
Mhm.
I'm sure, having worked with so many companies, have seen organizations with these people with cross.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. They're
Yeah.
the person you walk in and obviously you always ask, who am I supposed to know? They always say these senior leaders, right? And then there's always another person. Oh, you need to talk to Steve. Oh, you need to talk to Sandy. They know everybody. And you look at where they sit in the organization, and maybe it might not be a particularly high
Right.
institutionally powerful level. But man, this person knows everything about everybody and has just found a way to work across, to your point, all these different silos and different levels, and they've done it by helping. They've done it by being curious and wanting to know how people are doing and how they can help, and it provides an incredible amount of value,
Yeah.
I'm sure, to them, but also to the organization.
And in order to get these folks who didn't work for me to actually be helpful, I had to prove that I was going to be helpful to them. So I guess the long and short of it is, it helped me by better understanding their roles too.
Yes.
So again, this goes back to, I think, your original question of the importance of breaking down silos within companies and building connections among people who don't necessarily work together.
Yep.
Like, what is the point? Well, the point is you're going to actually help the entire organization be more successful, and you're going to help individuals actually grow both professionally and personally, which again makes the workplace that much more vibrant.
So can I, again, we go back to this, how do you replicate that in this sort of flexible hybrid world, remote world we're in now, but then ultimately will be more of this flexible dynamic on-site remote reality we'll move into. One of the thoughts that I wanted to ask you about that I had the other day was, what about LinkedIn? Like, what if you go on LinkedIn and just look up your own organization, and who are people you aren't connected to on LinkedIn in your organization, who are maybe in different jobs and different levels? Could you link into them? Something like that. Does that help?
I think that's a great idea, but I hesitate to encouraging people to do that unless they are ready to offer help to the people.
Yes.
With. Because Callie, how many times do you get a LinkedIn request from somebody, and you probably say yes because they look interesting, and then within 2 minutes you get the sale,
right?
And without any inkling of asking you about you, or
right,
any comment about something that, and they could go look at your Twitter feed or your Instagram feed or some other place where you are publicly putting out information, and they could have one sentence. Yeah. And I tell you, so to me I think that's a great idea, but really encourage people to go the extra, like maybe 5 minutes or maybe 3 minutes, to do a little research, to think about how when you reach out to them, you could offer to be a little bit of help to them. And before anybody who's listening says, oh my God, how do you have time to help everybody? I assure you, you become more efficient when you are very helpful, because guess what? Then you have a zillion million people to tap who can help you.
Well, I think that's great. And I want to go back to something that you were saying earlier that I think is very important. Diversifying your connections, making sure you have all sorts of different people that you are not linking into on LinkedIn, but just connecting into, helping, understanding. Talk about that, because I think that's one of the things that we tend to do if we're not intentional about this, is we tend to just be connected to people who are just like us, right?
No, and again, there have been many times in my life where everybody I have been around looked just like, well, nobody's as short as me. So I would say other than that, or the same age, etc. But over the years, a couple of things that I have done that I think has been extraordinarily helpful in helping me expand and diversify my quote unquote circles is getting involved in local nonprofits, global nonprofits, but also local, because not only have I, not only is it a good thing to do,
yes,
but also it really helps you meet and interact with people who live in extraordinarily different lives. And, case in point, about 5 years ago, I got involved with the Lower East Side Girls Club, and then I joined their board. And for those of you who do not live in Manhattan, the Lower East Side of New York City is one of the most, where you have such a delineation between highly, highly wealthy and extraordinarily poor. Right butt next to each other. Okay. And that, we know inequality breeds all kinds of hardships, and, we could spend the rest of the podcast talking about that, but just getting to know the girls who belong, they age from their age from 8 to 18, was just an extraordinary experience to not only learn about them, what their lives are like, what their hopes and dreams are, but it helped me learn about things about myself. Now, mind you, another board I serve on is the U.S. arm of the UN High Commission for Refugees. So I, very fortunate to have been able to visit refugee hotspots around the world, for the last six years, obviously not 2020, but to actually meet refugees who have fled their home countries has been, I mean, I don't even know how to put into words what I learned from that experience and what I learned about people and how resilient humans can be. So again, I'm not suggesting everybody goes off to refugee camps to bring diversity into their networks, but we all live in cities and locations where there are local organizations that need our help. And they don't necessarily, I mean, of course they need your money, but if you're not in a place where you can be financially supporting, you can offer your business acumen. You can showcase their work on social, but just by getting involved, you are going to meet people who are different from yourself. So that is one. Two, be very intentional about asking the people you know to introduce you to people who don't look just like you, because we're all connected to others.
I think that's great. Great advice. And I want to go back to nonprofits and being involved. So you wrote in the book, and I thought this was brilliant too. Again, you can tell everybody I am a big fan of this book, but you talk about how organizations, one of the ways that they can help people connect with one another in their business is to volunteer, to go to have everybody go out and volunteer. And I thought, as things begin to open back up and it's safe to gather again, and organizations are thinking about how can we get people together and interacting with one another, I thought this idea of volunteering was so smart. Talk a little bit more about that. What could that look like?
Well, first of all, there's various companies that actually provide platforms for companies so that they can actually be managing the
Oh,
volunteer match, Benevity. There's several others that, of course, I'm drawing a blank. But these are platforms that companies can actually deploy that allow them to give all their, whether they're the size of Microsoft or, a company of 25 people, so that employees can actually track their volunteer hours, their
oh,
giving, all of that.
hmm.
Which again, over time will show and help companies corroborate their growth with how much time off they're giving to their employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. So this is not a new thing, and again, studies show when employees are volunteering, they are, just like with meaningfully connecting, they are that much more productive. They are much more likely to recommend the company to others. And we also know that millennials, Gen Zs, younger populations have a proclivity to want to work for companies
Yep.
that are making social impact, making purpose part of the ethos of everything they do. So you are right on the right track. And I will say that, as we start to gather, instead of a happy hour, this is a wonderful thing. If you can go to a senior center and help out,
Yep.
safe, if you can be, I mean, it's an age old, obvious kind of like soup kitchens, but there are so many people that need help right now. There are so many people that are hurting that a company just literally needs to just do a little Googling in their local area and they will find plenty of opportunities. And I do agree, as things open up, that could be a tremendous opportunity.
So a number of years ago, I was sitting with a senior leader, and we were talking about how to help people get together outside of work, right? Because people were so busy. And he said one of the things that his default always was golf, right? That was one of the great ways of connecting. And then a member of his team suggested, well, why not instead do we do a Habitat for Humanity house? And he said, he hadn't even really thought about it, right? He just thought, oh, yeah, that could be a good way to. And he said it showed him that there are different ways that you can pull different people together to connect that he hadn't even really thought about. And so I think one of the volunteering example is a great way to think about that.
Volunteer Cares, New York Cares, for those of us in New York, have so many opportunities that groups can be using. Departments can use. It's a great way, again, cross-functional teams. It's a great way to meet people that you would never normally meet within your department. And obviously, if the company is at an Uber stage where they're ready to make the big investment, the platform Benevity, I highly recommend.
Great. Good. Now, before we wrap this up, we could, again, I could truly talk about this book for hours. I'm going to put it up there. I recommend it. Please buy it for everybody. That if you're a leader, buy it for everybody who works for you. If you're just an individual that's part of a bigger organization, suggest that your managers have everybody come together and talk about this book and maybe brainstorm ways that you can coordinate and connect, not just within your team, but beyond your team creatively, and start putting the wheels in motion so that this is just one of the things you do in your organization as we move forward. But before I let you go, what do you hope this book does for the world? What do you hope comes out of it?
Honestly, I think if we can pivot that traditional mindset that we have had when we have gone into quote unquote networking mode, and instead we pivot it to how can we be of help? And then if we truly listen when we talk to others and then respond, I think the world will be a better place.
It
And I
absolutely will.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that doesn't sound too Pollyanna-ish, because we've been through some challenges. This country, the world, it's been tough times, and obviously for many people, extraordinarily tough times. So I think just leading with that, there's no bad that can come from that. And I think also if we realize just how powerful building meaningful connections is, both from a personal standpoint, but also professional. I think the drug is very contagious.
I agree. And you said something to me a couple weeks ago when we were talking, that how often do you get a reset?
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, we are, I joke that we're in purgatory right now, where we have one toe out the door and the rest of us are kind of stuck inside. And for those of us who live in apartment buildings, it's kind of like when your neighbor orders, really aromatic food for dinner, Indian or Thai or Chinese food, and it smells so good, but guess what? You don't get any.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're kind of in that mode, but we have a few months before we are going to be, quote unquote, whatever returning to normalcy looks like. And we have a chance to be really intentional about building these communities and these connections that are going to help drive our goals personally and professionally. So now is the time to do that. And for business leaders, now is the time to bring that intentionality into the workplace.
Amen. I agree. Okay, I'm going to close out by telling everybody a story how I benefited from Susan's connectivity wizardry. So, gosh, probably 3 or 4 years ago, you connected me with Shelley Brindle, right? Now, Shelley Brindle had just retired as a senior leader at HBO, and we happened to live near each other in New Jersey. And you just said, I think you two would like to meet. And of course, because you said it, we're both like, sure, let's meet. So we had lunch. We found out we have a million things in common, and she's become a friend, and she's now the mayor of one of the local towns near me. And it's been just wonderful to watch her political. I was with her when she was doing her campaign to become mayor. I mean, it's just been great. So that's somebody I would never have met if you had not just said, I think the two of you would really enjoy each other. And that's just one example that you've done for many, many people. And I hope people will take Susan's wisdom and apply it to their own life, and just, again, use this moment to reset, as you said, my friend. So thank you. Oh, and I will also say, I give books away on my newsletter every now and then. I've never had a book where people have responded so quickly. It's like, I wish I had. I only can give away 3. I mean, because I can't, I was just like, wow. So anyway, just know, I think you've hit on something. It is, and I'm just so happy that you've written this book. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that story about Shelley. That you literally just put me in cloud 9. Thank you, Callie, truly.
Well, I didn't do what you said to do in the book, which is to follow up and let you know how it went. So now I said, I was like,
like I said, this is the beautiful thing about meaningful connections. It isn't about the immediacy, other than following up right away so you don't forget. But this is the long term. This is over the long haul, over our lifetime. So you are plenty within the boundaries.
Oh, good. Okay. I didn't violate a rule. Okay, good. Well, thank you, Susan. Please buy the book. You will not be disappointed. And thank you.
Bless you.